As we continue our discussion of the psychology of certification, another big topic is study strategies. How do you go about preparing for a Cisco exam? Well, there are several approaches, and this is not going to be a comprehensive listing, but here are some of the big ones. Number one, do you have a job right now where you can get some on-the-job experience? Do you have a few extra routers or switches in your job where you can put together a small topology and play with some commands, set up route redistribution on a network containing only 3 routers? Can you do something like that? Can you pull from what you're doing day to day on the job and maybe even leverage the equipment, assuming your company's okay with that? Can you leverage the equipment you use on your job to give you some experience? Because in the world of Cisco, having actual hands-on experience is so important. But when you're preparing for a specific exam, oftentimes hands-on experience, while it is incredibly valuable, isn't enough. You need to know what's taught in the course. And that's not to say Cisco always asks questions that come directly from course material. They say that they have the right to go outside of course material, and they certainly do. That's where on-the-job experience comes in so handy. But you need to know what's in the course. What might you potentially be tested on from the course? And personally, I'm a full-time instructor of Cisco courses, so I'm a huge fan of classroom training. I do my classroom training virtually over the internet where you can attend from anywhere, but we go through the official Cisco certification curriculum, and as we go through this, I point out exam tips to my students. I don't do brain dumps. I don't believe in that sort of thing. But I say, this is a certification relevant topic. I want you to really spend some extra study time here. And if you go attend a classroom where you have an instructor that really cares about your success, that can be invaluable. When I was preparing for my first attempt at the Voice CCA, I'm working on my second CCA, I had been studying on my own for several months and I was making steady progress. I was celebrating small victories along the way. I was excited about what I was learning. But then I went and took a week-long boot camp. And coming out of that boot camp, I remember saying that I learned about as much in 1 week at that boot camp as I would have learned in about a month and a half of independent study. I could have got there on my own, sure. But it compressed time for me. By being in an environment that was so focused on a particular course, and by being around others and sharing in their experiences and getting tips from the instructor, the classroom experience allowed me to squeeze a month and a half of study down into a week of study. And we probably want to supplement this classroom experience with self-study. And there are different self-study guides out there. Obviously, I've written several titles for Cisco Press, so I'm a big fan of the Cisco Press materials when it comes to self-study. And a question that comes up sometimes when you're trying to select a book to do your self-study with, the question might come up, oh, what's the difference between the Cisco Press official certification guide and the authorized self-study guide? Well, let me give you some examples. I wrote the CCNP T-Shoot official certification guide. The official certification guide is where I took the course. I got an advanced copy of the course materials. I got a listing of exam objectives, and I wrote this book from scratch, putting it into my own words, using my own examples, and that's what's really unique about the official certification guide. You're hearing the writing style. You're hearing the teaching style of the author. The certification guide has other benefits as well. It has really important topics highlighted for you. There's a series of questions that you go through before you get into a chapter to kind of measure where you are right now. Before you even get into the chapter, where are you now in your level of understanding about those topics? There are study tables that you can print out where you need to, from memory, be able to fill in the blank cells in this spreadsheet. At the end of a chapter, there's a list of terms that you want to make sure you understand from that chapter, and those terms are defined for you in the glossary. This is a book highly tailored toward exam success. But with that said, I think this series of books is also very valuable for a day-to-day reference. That's the official certification guide. Cisco Press also has a series of authorized self-study guides. What's the difference? Well, I wrote the authorized self-study guide for C-Voice. In fact, I wrote the second edition, the third edition, and as we speak, I'm wrapping up the fourth edition. The authorized self-study guide, it's a bit different than the official certification guide. Here's why. The authorized self-study guide is very similar to the course material. In fact, most of the verbiage that you'll find in the authorized self-study guide is directly from the course material. It's basically the course that's been molded, it's been shaped, it's been tweaked by the author a bit, enhanced by the author, but the majority of the content of the book is directly out of the course. And there's huge benefit to that as well. a lot of people might prefer this over the official certification guide because oftentimes when Cisco asks questions on the exam, they might come directly from bullet points in the course. Well, here you essentially have the course in book form. Two different approaches to self-study with Cisco Press books. And some of the more popular courses, you might find both an official certification guide and an authorized self-study guide. You might want to get one or the other based on this discussion, or you might want to get both. What other resources do we have for studying, though? Well, certainly Cisco has a wealth of resources out at their site. At Cisco's website, if you have credentials to log in, you can get to some extra tools that they have. I know I frequently use their command lookup tool as I'm doing study or as I'm preparing for class, and I want to know the details about a specific piece of syntax. I'll go out to the command lookup tool under the support area at Cisco's website. I'll type in that command and I'll get documentation about the command that I'm interested in. You could also join one of the many discussion boards out there where you can virtually have a study group with other people pursuing a similar certification. One of the most popular ones out there is Group Study. You might want to check out groupstudy.com. And something else that really helps me when I'm studying for an advanced exam like a CCA lab is building a home lab. If you don't have access to equipment at your work where you can put together your own lab there for experimentation and for learning, you could certainly rent rack time online. There are various vendors that will allow you to remotely access their gear, and I've certainly done my share of that and found that valuable. And this is a personal preference. Many people will disagree with me on this, but as a personal preference, I find a huge advantage of having my own gear. I'm the one responsible for updating the version of the iOS. If something goes horribly wrong, I'm the one that's responsible for connecting to the console port and transferring a new image via X modem. You really get into the maintenance of the hardware oftentimes if you have your own gear. And I'm studying for my second attempt at the voice CCA right now, and I think it's very valuable to see the phones and the displays on the phones and hear the phones ringing. And there are ways of virtualizing this, certainly. But personally, I enjoy having my own home lab, and I've done this a couple of times in my career. I've dipped into the family savings to do this when I was going after my route switch CCA lab back in 2001. After I had failed my second attempt at that lab, I realized one of my weaknesses was ISDN. So I dipped into the family savings, with the agreement of my wife, of course, and I invested in an ISDN simulator. And I got really good at ISDN by having the actual gear in my home. And I did great on that topic when I took and then passed my third attempt at the Route Switch CCA lab. And then I turned around and sold it, and I got back most of what I had paid for that simulator to begin with. And now studying for my voice CCA lab, I was able to use some equipment from my work, but I needed a lot of extra equipment. So we decided that it's worth it for a career investment to once again dip into the family savings. We dipped into our emergency fund, and I spent over $7,000 from our emergency fund to buy gear to build this lab, and that's supplemented with about another $5,000 worth of gear that I got from my work, making about a $12,000 lab total. And I bought that, of course, with the intent of once I pass the CCIE voice lab, I can turn around and I can sell it. And for me, I believe that is a worthwhile investment in my future career. I'm a big fan of building a home lab.